It doesn't have to be this way. It doesn't have to be that way.
Greatest Hits Radio, welcome to the evening show with Jackie Brambles. That track we've just heard was a hit for the Blow Monkeys in 1987. It doesn't have to be this way. Led as ever by their charismatic frontman and founder, Dr. Robert, who I'm delighted to say is our special guest for the evening. Hiya, Robert.
Hi, Jackie. How you doing?
I'm great. How are you?
Very well, thank you. Very well.
Are you rolling around in tomatoes in Spain as we look on enviously?
No, it's not the tomato season, to be honest. It's more like the broad beans, and they're not great for rolling in.
You've tried, but it just didn't work.
Yeah.
Well, how long have you lived in Spain for?
We've been here about 22 years now.
Wow. I mean, I went onto the Blow Monkeys website, and there's one of your videos there has got this gorgeous building in looks like the middle of nowhere in a mountainous region. Is that your house?
It could be. I didn't know it was on there. But it's we bought a bit of land and we sort of gradually saved up and started building a place on it. That's how we did it. So we're still chipping away, you know. Well,
listen, we want to talk about the second album that the Blow Monkeys ever had, of course, was hugely successful, Animal Magic, and it's about to be reissued. It's a 4 CD deluxe version. Have I got that right?
That's right.
And when is that? Is that out now?
I think it's out now. I think it came out on the last week of January. It came out as a white vinyl double LP as well.
Isn't it? I think it's so gratifying that collecting things has sort of come back around again.
Yeah, I guess, especially people who might be interested in us are still really interested in buying records, even though they come with a download code inside and all that, you know. There's still like the immersive experience of holding a sleeve and a piece of art. Yeah.
Well, listen, that's something that we want to talk about, which is the first time you ever held a record sleeve in your childhood. That's where we'll start. Just quickly before we do, you are about to embark on a UK tour, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm flying off tomorrow, so we're starting. We kind of play all the time, so it's more like a never-ending tour. That's what we do. Yeah.
So people can go onto the website and find. I think you start in Northampton, don't you, on the 24th?
Bloodmenders, yeah, it's all up on the website. We're pretty much playing all the way through until the end of the year.
Brilliant. Okay, well, listen, let's go back in time. You didn't grow up anywhere as exotic as Spain, but a beautiful part of the world nonetheless. Was it King's Lynn that you grew up in?
Yeah, I was born in Scotland, but my family moved, as you can tell from my accent, when I was very young, so I got out and grew up in the Fens. Yeah, King's Lynn was really my hometown until I was about 15.
And was it a very musical household that you grew up in? Were your mum and dad into music? Do you have any sort of early memories, perhaps not of when you were in charge of what was being played, but when they were? Yeah,
I've got two older sisters, 10 years older than me, and they'd gone through the whole of the 60s buying singles. So I had all the, they had all the Beatles singles and Bacharach and David and things like, and lots of soul, Aretha and all that sort of stuff. And my dad was a real kind of crooner. He loved to sing in the car and in the bathroom and all that. He was into kind of, Perry Como and stuff like that. So there was always a lot of music around.
Papa loves mambo. Mama loves mambo.
What about the first single you ever bought? Would you remember that? The one that you sort of saved up your pocket money for and went into town to get?
Yeah, I think it would have been 1972.
Okay.
And I think at the time, Metal Guru by T-Rex was number one, but they reissued a version of Deborah, which was the Tyrannosaurus Rex song, on the back of Bolan's popularity at the time. And I heard that on the radio and was totally transfixed by the kind of acoustic guitar and the Larry the Lamb voice. And so I went off to Woolworths, as it would have been.
Yeah.
And you could sit in the booths and listen, and I'd stay in there as long as I could, listening to everything that was released until they kicked me out. And then I'd have to spend my 50p pocket money on something to justify it. That was the one. So Deborah by Tyrannosaurus Rex, as it would have been, was a reissue, and that would have been 1972.
How old would you have been then?
11.
Well, I mean, that's pretty sophisticated taste for an 11-year-old. But as you say, perhaps that's the influence of the older sisters.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there was a lot of music around. My mum was a real jazz freak as well. She loved Sarah Vaughan and Ella Fitzgerald and all that. So there was a lot of music around.
Right.
So, and it was good music as well. It wasn't, to be honest, it wasn't. So I think, but I mean, I don't think they shared my love of that particular record. There was something about that record that transfixed me. And then, of course, after that, I was off and running.
You look like a stallion.
The very first song of Mark Bolan's to get into the top 40 when the band was still known as Tyrannosaurus Rex. Then they switched to T-Rex a short time afterwards. That track, Deborah, was the first song ever purchased by Dr. Robert of the Blow Monkeys when he was just a lad. And we'll be back with more musical memories from Robert next on Greatest Hits Radio. Welcome back to the evening show with Jackie Brambles, where it's just you, me, and Dr. Robert of the Blow Monkeys. So we learned before the break, Robert, that at a pretty tender age, 11 or so, you had a passion and obviously an ear for good music, with your first ever single being a Mark Bolan one. How about then the first live gig you ever went to?
Well, the thing was that I really wanted to go to Northern Soul clubs where all my mates were going, because King's Lynn was a Northern Soul town. There was a record shop there called the Soul Bowl, which was quite well known. And
yeah.
They'd take off to like Derby and Leicester and even Wigan on the weekends, and I couldn't go. I was just a little bit too young. And there were never any gigs in King's Lynn. King's Lynn was not on the circuit. The nearest gig was a place called the West Monkton Pavilion. And in 1977, I moved to Australia.
Oh. Really?
With my mum. I moved to Sydney. But just before I went, in March 77, a poster appeared in King's Lynn saying T-Rex and the Damned are playing West Monkton Pavilion.
Wow.
And I couldn't believe it, because I'd loved the Damned, because that was they released New Rose, the first punk single, before the Pistols or the Clash or anyone like that. And it was such a great record. And I was leaving, so I left a week before that gig.
Oh.
So after all those years of waiting, and here's my two favourite things at the time, T-Rex and the Damned. So I go to Sydney, and my sister says, oh, come on, we'll go to a gig. So the first gig I ever went to at the Hordern Pavilion in Sydney was Jethro Tull.
Ah, how did that go down?
Well, it was weird, because I wasn't a Jethro Tull fan. But, they were doing Songs from the Wood, and they were brilliant live, I've got to say. He was good. They were kind of much more bluesy than I expected. And,
right.
He's a guy standing on one leg, dressed as a medieval peasant, playing a flute. What's not to love?
Well, tonight, Robert, we right that wrong. We shall play a damn track, because you were gypped out of that gig by forces beyond your adolescent control. This one's for you.
Every night I'm there, I'm always there. She knows I...
Eloise got to number 3 in 1986 for The Damned. So you were in Australia for a good old chunk of your childhood and adolescence, and then you came back to London specifically to form a band? Yeah,
because I got to know those guys, and all those guys and the Go-Betweens and a whole lot of Australian bands came to London at that time, because it's pre-internet, and you think, I started playing, and I'd started writing, and I was busking, actually, at just a nice busking spot just on the steps of the Sydney Opera House.
Oh, lovely.
Circular key. So, and the first time anybody stops and listens to your wobblings and puts a penny in or an Aussie dollar in the sort of in the hat, you're hooked,
Yeah.
So I thought, I'm going to go back, form a band. So that's what I did. Came back to London, 1981, looked in the back pages of Melody Maker, as you do. I didn't know anybody. I had no connections in London at the time. And I answered an ad for somebody that they said they were looking for an angular guitarist, influences Roxy music. I thought that meant somebody that was into fishing. I wasn't quite sure what it meant. So I went along with my fishing rod and my guitar. And
of course you did.
I got the gig. And then so that was it. Me and Neville, who was the saxophone player in this particular band, said after a week, right, we're forming a new band,
That was the start of the Blow Monkeys.
So that's how it started.
Were you, when you came back from Australia and straight into the music scene in London, were you sort of, obviously a big part of the 80s was the creativity around having a look, and a bit of style, and I don't know, just sort of a glossiness, I think, maybe. And did you have that then, or did that come later?
I don't think I had it fully formed. I think I was a bit confused, to be honest, looking at those early pictures. There was a slight gothiness about the thing, probably to do with birthday party and Nick Cave and those sort of things.
Well, it must have been a very, creatively very rich environment, albeit you were probably struggling, in terms of financially, as many bands were. Can you remember sort of who your contemporaries were in kind of the same boat? They were maybe just starting to get good at what they were doing, maybe attracting a bit of attention from the A&R guys. Who was in a similar sort of level as you at that time?
I suppose people like Lloyd Cole, maybe Aztec. I mean, the first thing I remember seeing when I got back to London that I really related to, there was a Postcards Records Presents evening at the venue, and there was Orange Juice, who I loved, and Joseph Kay, and the Fire Engines, and a very young Roddy Frame, I think, not doing Aztec Camera, just on his own.
Right.
And that was like, oh God, this is amazing.
Oh, and did they break before you?
Yeah. The Orange Juice did,
Yeah, well ahead of you.
Well, they got signed. They were making that album. Rip It Up and Start Again probably was just before Digging Your Scene, but the things like it was great to see them having success. It made you think, we can do this.
Orange Juice got to number 8 in 1983 with Rip It Up. So it was a good 2 or 3 years after that you started to catch a break. And how did it happen for you? It was RCA you got signed to, was it?
We were just plugging away, like I said, for years and years and years. And then we got a residency at a place called the Moonlight Club in West Hampstead. I noticed that the crowds we had 4 weeks there of residency every Friday night, and record companies started to turn up. And crowds, and we were getting better. I could tell we were getting better, and eventually, they one of them offered us a singer's deal, and RCA came in and at the last minute and offered us an album, and then the guy that signed us left 2 weeks later, so we were kind of stranded there. But we were allowed to get on to make the album. So the first album we made, Limping for a Generation, was pretty much us just left to our own devices.
Right.
But with the budget, they let us use strings and things, and Pete Wilson produced it. It was producing the Style Council at the time. And there were no hits on it, but it got good reviews and it got us kind of noticed, and we started to play. But it wasn't until the second album, and for some reason we got on the Wogan show. I think somebody cancelled, and we weren't, this is before we'd had any radio play or any recognition, but we got the Wogan show, and
oh right.
I think we went from playing to 200 people a night to 2,000 overnight. That's how powerful.
I was going to say, I mean, we talk often on this show about Top of the Pops being that overnight life-changing thing, but Wogan at the time was, absolutely huge.
Yeah, I mean, the thing was that, as well as I did, there was only a few channels. Everybody watched the same things in those days. Yeah. So if you got on Top of the Pops, or if you got on Wogan, or you got some, it was a life changer. So that I think pushed that record onto the radio as well. People started to notice us. So from that moment on, Digging became, it was a life changer because it was a hit everywhere. It was a hit in America. We ended up going on Dick Clark's American Bandstand and touring. I just got your message, baby.
That was the one, Digging Your Scene, a huge hit for the Blow Monkeys in 1986. And we will be back with more from the Blow Monkeys frontman and founder and our very special guest tonight on The Great Conversation, Dr. Robert. Next, Jackie Brambles with you on the evening show. We are cozying in for a top-notch natter with tonight's special guest, frontman and founder of the Blow Monkeys, Dr. Robert. So before the break, Robert, we were talking about Digging Your Scene. Obviously, it was the hit that broke through for you guys, both here and in the States. It's that rare thing where you get this double whammy of your debut hit on both sides of the Atlantic.
Yeah.
Let's talk about on this side first. Do you remember that first Top of the Pops, that experience?
Yeah, I do.
So the first one you went on was on March 1986, and you would have been in the studio. Oh, that's a good one. You would have been in the studio with Hip Sway, Culture Club, Howard Jones, the Rolling Stones, and Freddie Jackson.
Yeah, the Rolling Stones weren't there. I'm sure that they had done a pre-record.
Oh, right, okay, right.
And I don't think Culture Club were there either. And I knew George because I've been going to this club called Taboo, which he went to.
Right.
I knew, kind of had mutual friends, but no, they weren't there. Hipsway were there. I remember Hipsway, that was their breakthrough as well, I think, at that time. I mean, it was, I was living in a little flat in Brixton above a record shop. Mm. The record company sent these limos around to pick you up to town. And I'm like, please take it away. I really don't want this.
This is embarrassing,
limo. Yeah, I'll get the tube. It's all right, please. And so it was one of them. And then we get there and, to be honest, anyone who says different is lying. It's such a thrill because that's what you really want. You want to get on top of the pops. And but the actual process of being on the show is quite mundane. You have to get there early in the morning, and then you run through the thing about 3 or 4 times, and you're miming.
Yeah.
So by the time you get to actually do it, and the bar's been open for hours. No wonder people do slightly eccentric performances because you're miming in the bar's open. and it's an overwhelming experience anyway. This kind of weird.
It's very surreal. Yeah, that sort of.
But it was one of them that you go the next day into the fish and chip shop in Brixton, and the girls behind the bar are talking about. Did you see that last night? Did you see? I'm thinking, wow, this has changed everything. Yeah, briefly, I had my little moment.
Well, big moment because it blew up at the same time, obviously, in the States. Were you sort of immediately whisked over there and put on somebody's tour, or? We had sort of created waves on college radio with something called Forbidden Fruit beforehand, and there were murmurings. And I had been to New York to record, to do a kind of remix on Digging, which became the actual single. But then they started to tell us that the video was getting a lot of play, and the video for Digging you've seen on MTV, which was where it was at, and So they brought us onto the Robert Palmer tour. He was number 1 at the time with Addicted to Love. Oh wow!
So the first gig we did was flying into Arizona to play Red Rocks to support to him.
Robert Palmer, Addicted to Love. So you're suddenly whisked off then to play support on Robert Palmer's US tour. And it's a thing I've heard often, actually, through the course of these interviews, that on those rare occasions where a British act is charting almost simultaneously here and in America, they're sort of suddenly, into a private plane, thrown onto a really big star's tour to get as much exposure to their huge audiences as they can. But unfortunately, it can happen that they're opening for somebody that's really not suitable in terms of the audience. But that's a good fit, I would have imagined. Yeah, we did a few gigs before that were totally unsuitable. Bands like Sisters of Mercy and things like that. and X, goth bands. But Robert Palmer, it was great. It was, he was slightly, distant. Right. But, we were loving it. We were just, and of course we went off then and did our own tour, and then we did a few gigs with the Psychedelic Furs, who had a big hit with Pretty in Pink because it was something. Of course, there was a film being made on. There had been a film used that song. So, and then they're telling us all the time that Digging's going up the charts, and it's in the top 20, and you're doing Dick Clark's American Bandstand, which I knew all about, So I met Dick Clark, who was like a waxworks. I've never met anybody that shiny who was totally 100% showbiz. No one home. But that's probably not fair. But that's how it seemed to me at the time, anyway. Mind you, I hadn't met Noel Edmonds yet. Were you sort of put into any kind of, sausage making factory in the States where they tried to change the band or push you in certain directions, or was it really an in and out because of digging your scene? I think there was efforts to say, you could be the next George Michael, that sort of thing, but right. See, what people always underestimated about us was that although I was the front man and the singer and the songwriter, we were very much, because of the way we got together and the experiences we've had, we were like a family, our band. Right, yeah. Any attempt to kind of break that apart, which there were, and make me a solo act or to push us in a certain direction and get, it was met with resistance. Right. Because I felt that, and I still do feel, which is why we're still together, that
there's something more important than that, and there's a really strong bond, and that you only get that magic when you've got that bond in a band. So, no, it wasn't going to happen.
You were not up for being the next George Michael. Can you recall? Are you ask sort of the most bonkers rock and roll moment that you're allowed to talk about, where it was a kind of a, oh yeah, this is exactly what I thought happened when you became a pop star. You know, when I was looking at Top of the Pops as a kid, this is exactly how I thought it would be. And then is there a moment where it was a bit of a shocker that actually this is the reality?
You know, I was always very lucky. I had really good friends around me. Even in a kind of, I had a little bit where I was tabloid fodder, you know, for a while. Piers Morgan, when he was writing his column, good old Piers, followed me around and blah, 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 but I got rid of him. I think it's because, you know, my dad was a boxer, you see. People thought I was some effete little guy, but actually my dad was a boxer in the RAF, so I knew how to handle myself. So there were guys that came up in America said, hey, you faggot, you know, I've seen you on and the guy had a knife on me and stuff like that. You know, we had a few of those nutters moments, but, you know, but no, pinch me moments. I mean, I think this, in 1987, we played the Hammersmith Odeon with Curtis Mayfield, and we'd made a record with him, the late great Curtis Mayfield.
Yeah.
And that was just like, I couldn't believe it. You know, here we are. Because I loved the guy so much. I loved his music. And to meet somebody that good, who was that humble, taught me a lesson, taught me a life lesson. He was very kind to everyone around him. He was very, not self-effacing, just, he knew he was good, but he wasn't an egomaniac in any sense. And it just the way he held himself and his view on things, I thought that's amazing, to have been through what he's been through and to have written what he's written, and to be like that was a lesson for me, and he became a bit of a friend and a mentor.
Oh, how wonderful. Well, we just have time to get in one final musical memory from you, Robert. We're looking for a song that means something to you, either because it is very strongly connected to a special personal memory, or because it just simply has an enduring power to always uplift or comfort or inspire you every single time you play it, guaranteed.
The song that really connects with me, I used to go and watch football in Kings Lynn, the Linnets, with my dad. And my dad died when I was quite young, so it's a bit of a memory for me. Standing there, freezing cold at half-time, watching this godforsaken football. It was really awful. Suddenly, Kings Lynn versus Starbridge or something. It would be freezing and I couldn't feel my feet anymore. And then over the PA would come Be the Pain's Band of Gold.
Oh, wow.
And I think for a while, and as a kid, it transported me. For the 3 minutes that it was on, it just, and it still does. There's something about that song. It's just pure joy.
Now that you're gone, all that's left, and love me like you tried.
What a great choice. Robert, are you guys working on new material this year?
We are, yeah, we are. We've just, I've just started writing a new album, and we've got a new label, and so that will come out early next year.
Brilliant. All right, we'll come back and visit, will you, when you're ready to rock with that?
I'd love to.
That'd be brilliant. All the best with the tour and the reissue of Animal Magic, and thank you so much for taking the time today.
Not at all. Thank you, Jackie.
All right, mate. All the best.
Cheers.
A gentleman, a scholar, and allegedly a doctor. Dr. Robert of the Blow Monkeys.